Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We're going to start the webinar in just a couple of minutes. We want to give everyone a chance to get logged on and set up before we kick it off. So if you'll bear with us, we'll start shortly. Looks like we've still got a steady stream of folks logging on, so we're going to get started in just a couple of more seconds, about another minute or so. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, SI's Path to Accelerate ATOs Through Automated STIG Compliance. My name is James Hughes, and I'm a cybersecurity sales engineer with DLT. Today, I'm happy to be joined by Nigel Hughes, who is the Vice President of Sales for SteelCloud. And before we get started, I'd like to go over just a couple of things so you know how to participate and get the most out of our event today. We've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface that you should see now. You're probably listening in using your computer speaker system by default, but if you'd prefer to join us over your phone, you can just select the telephone in the audio pane, and our dial-in information should be displayed for you. Now, you can submit questions for Nigel at any time during the presentation by typing them into the questions pane of the control panel, and we'll address those during the Q&A session at the end of our webinar today. I'd also like to point out that there is a handouts drop down there in the GoToWebinar app. There's 4 handouts you can download there. And if you selected your choice of delivery service during registration, you'll be receiving your gift card code within the next couple of hours. And within 48 hours, you're going to also receive an email with a link to the recording of our presentation along with a short survey. We'd really appreciate it if you'd complete that survey to let us know how we did today, as well as a little bit about your own STIG journey. Now, before becoming a sales engineer, I spent nearly 30 years working in cybersecurity in the Air Force and as a contractor. And a great deal of my time and effort was focused on information system security, ensuring compliance with STIGs and other benchmarks to achieve and maintain approval to operate. I spent a lot of long hours with a checklist in front of me, manually tweaking system security settings. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that pain. Now, to secure your systems and get that ATO, compliance is essential. So because of my background in cybersecurity and personal knowledge with the subject we're talking about today, I'm very excited for you to learn more about SteelCloud and their solution to automate STIG and CIS compliance. So please let me now introduce Nigel Hughes, Vice President of Sales for SteelCloud. Go ahead, Nigel.
James, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thanks to our friends at DLT for hosting today's event. We're excited to be with you. I am Nigel Hughes. I'm the VP over here at SteelCloud, and we work very closely with the DLT organization to bring our solution to integrators and components alike. And I'm really happy to be here to be able to share with you an overview of how we can help you accelerate ATOs, how we can help you with RMF accreditations, and how we can help you accelerate the deliverables in any given program. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on today. SteelCloud is a cybersecurity company, and we are focused on automating policy compliance for STIG and CIS. A couple of things I wanted to convey here. First of all, we've been doing this for almost 13 years now, and it's all we do. We don't do anything else. Our product is very mature, it's proven, and I think you'll see that there are some tremendous unique characteristics that we'll go through today. The product is out there. There are hundreds of installations for the DoD components themselves, but almost everything we do is through the integrator community. So we work with you, the systems integrators, to be able to bring this to the federal government. We have a number of different use cases that we can get into today, but essentially we are in operational unclassified large data center infrastructure. We're also in air-gap disconnected high-side infrastructure and everything in between. Essentially, we have the operational to the tactical. For the last 3 years, in addition to our federal program, we've been supporting you, industry, and helping contractors and integrators meet the 800-171 compliance obligation. Of course, this is now morphing into CMMC, and again, we are front and center there supporting level 3 and above, and we'd be delighted to talk to any of you about your requirements internally from the corporate perspective. So that's a little bit about us. All right. What is the problem that we address? Well, everybody on the call is very familiar with the fact that every single computer in the entire federal government has to meet a policy compliance standard, mostly with the DoD and Intel, and increasingly more and more civilian agencies. It is STIG related, and there is some CIS. The government, of course, spends around $8 billion on this issue, and it's a major part of their entire defensive cyber budget. Now, in terms of addressing STIG compliance, the requirement, of course, is not just compliance, but validation of that compliance. And you're all familiar with these various standards here. Most of you are familiar with how it's done today. A lot of manual scanning and manual remediation work. There have been some tremendous attempts at automation, typically through things like scripting technologies, group policy, gold disks, that kind of thing. But how is the government doing? How are you as integrators doing? Well, unfortunately, the results are not good. C+ at best, and of course, we're increasingly seeing more and more focus on cyber, which means that we're starting to see things kind of the brakes applied to almost everything because of that. So these are some of the struggles I think that we're seeing in our sector. When we look at what the government is trying to do, especially around defense, there's a tremendous drive around modernization. And of course, if we look at the policy compliance, it's almost a source of friction for any of these endeavors. And this means that accreditations and the rollout of new secure technologies is often extended by weeks or months, sometimes beyond. When we look at existing deployments today, when we look at readiness, how are we applying policy updates to our various programs? How are we maintaining ongoing compliance as the policy keeps changing? And again, we're not doing a tremendous job at that right now. And a lot of this is affected by human resource. What resources do we have? And I think when we're looking at an increase in policy compliance, an increase in cyber assurance, and yet we're doing it with finite resources, it's kind of a broken equation. So the only real way to address this is through automation, and that will address the manpower skills gap, it will address availability, and of course, cost. So we have our first poll question. Let's get started. If age is only a state of mind, which category best describes your state of mind right now?
All right, you should see the poll question on your screen. So go ahead and select your answer. We'll give everybody just a minute or so to get their answers registered. If age is only a state of mind, which category best describes your state of mind right now? Are you a cheeky child, tormented teenager, a mad midlifer, or a groovy grandparent?
James, did you provide an answer to that question?
I did, and I am in the majority. I am a mad midlifer. It looks like more than half the folks are right there with me.
Oh, and me too. Me too. I'm not a grandparent yet, and the first two definitely do not apply. So I'm left with mad midlifer.
So surprisingly, there are quite a few cheeky children.
Oh, really?
Yeah, about 20% of the folks.
I love it. Love it. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. We're going to move forward. So what is the system integrator case for compliance automation? I think, as I've alluded, we're all struggling to get these various programs across the finish line, and we have to look at how we can most effectively utilize our staff, our resources as best we can. And while we're introducing automation, we don't want to compromise quality or consistency. We're seeing a lot of integrators, and it's often the IA folk, it's the people at the coalface, if you will, that are doing this work. They are the ones that are seeing cost overruns, lead times deteriorate around their deliverables, and quite often someone simply does a search to figure out, is there a better way of doing this? Is there an automation tool? And that's where we're often found. And this is where we're able to have a big impact on certain programs because we can reduce that delivery cost while also increasing the agility around that. So we understand that these are struggles that integrators have day in, day out. So what are the challenges then? Well, STIGs break things, CIS benchmarks break things. And that's because all of the applications that we work with were not typically designed to run in a STIG compliant environment. So this means policy controls are going to conflict with the system requirements of any given app stack. And so that has to be managed. We have to harden around app stacks. And this means that one policy or one size does not fit all. This is, I think, further compounded by the policy changing every 90 days. It's hard to keep up. We're talking about thousands of controls for OSs, for databases, for office suites, and this can be really disruptive. It can be really expensive, and increasingly, we're never reaching the end goal. We never kind of get to the point where, yes, we've done it. It's always in a state of flux. The manual processes do place a strain on the finite resources you have and your customer has. And so there have been, as I said earlier, attempts at automation through scripting products, things like Ansible, Puppet, Chef, Salt, things like that. Group policy, of course, is probably the biggest thing that we see out there where the AD folk are applying policy, and there's some merit in all of these, but they have all essentially proven to be less than ideal. When we look at the accreditation timeframes for RMF or simple ATOs, CCRIs, these all impact this whole process. So there's got to be a better way. And I think SteelCloud has been working for the last 13 years to figure out a better way, a more effective way for this to be addressed. When you approach any given program, this is typically what you're confronted with. And most of the integrators I've worked with, and we work with all of you, typically these are the tools that you're presented with for any given program. So I'm talking about the 4 columns on the right. ACAS, Nessus, that's the standard portfolio. Security compliance checker, the SCAP tools. These are the things that the government has when you arrive at the program. There are certain scripting developments that have been attempted over any given life of the program, and of course the group policy requirements. And all of these capabilities absolutely have their value, but all too often we tend to overextend their capabilities and we're not able to do the best job that we can. What I wanted to share here is that the ConfigOS product was built from the ground up to meet specifically these requirements and how we can use them to support your program to increase your deliverables and get a more rapid return on investment for this kind of implementation. We're going to share this content with you so you can have a chance to look at this at your own leisure. All right, I wanted to share our first user story here. This is from another integrator, a major integrator. Some of you are represented on our call today that may recognize this document. But what I wanted to share here is the use case. Now, you can see that we're looking here at almost 2,500 endpoints. And this integrator tells us that they spend 16 hours per endpoint per year doing policy compliance work. In this case, it was a high-side infrastructure, and it was all STIG compliance. And this includes the quarterly updates. It includes the changes in the OS. It includes the interim updates and all of that hardening around various app stacks. Now, that 16 hours for 2,500 endpoints translates to 40,000 hours per year. And that, if you look at an FTE of 2,000 hours, that's about 20 FTEs that were focused entirely on the STIG compliance aspect of this program. Now, with ConfigOS, we were able to reduce the time from 16 hours to just 1 hour, which meant that instead of 20 people, we could just manage this with 2 people. For this program, that meant that we freed up 18 people to focus on other cybersecurity tasks within the program initiative. Now, there's some dollar costs there that I think are real, but the stress, I think, the emphasis I would place on here would be the reallocation of those people, freeing them up to do other things. All right, so what results can you expect working with the ConfigOS product suite? I mentioned that hardening around app stacks, getting existing infrastructure into compliance rapidly, and our integrator partners tell us that we take about 90% of that upfront hardening effort out of the equation. Of course, as soon as you've got everything deployed and in production, what's going to happen? The policy is going to change. And one of the biggest issues that we see is the ingestion of the quarterly updates. How the heck are you going to manage those? How are you going to be effective in doing that without breaking things, without disrupting production and all of those things? So ConfigOS is very adept at being able to automate that process. One of the things that we're able to do, for example, is we are only applying the controls that have changed in the quarterly updates rather than the entire policy. And again, this makes for efficiencies, and it means that you can get things done really quite rapidly. The acceleration of the RMF process is a really big part of what ConfigOS promises, and that's the subject matter of our event today. We're able to provide the integration with the government tools to validate the compliance. So number one, of course, is STIG. ConfigOS will output directly into STIG and populate the entire checklist. And what's really cool about our product here in this use case is we're able to account for every single control. So it's not just those controls, those registries, those configuration files that lend themselves to rapid automation, but it's also the documentation controls, those physical security documentation and environmental issues. Those are all included and covered within the product. All right, we have poll question number 2, a little bit more serious this time.
All right, so our second poll is up now. You should see it. What STIG compliance challenge is top of mind for you in 2021? RMF accreditation, accelerated ATOs and CMMC readiness, an upcoming CCRI audit, keeping up with quarterly STIG updates, or hardening around app stacks? So we'll leave this up for about another 30 or 45 seconds, give you a chance to select your answers.
I'm wondering, Chris, if we, James, if we'd actually said all of the above, we perhaps should have had F.
True. So it looks like right now, about 57% say accelerated ATOs and CMMC readiness are their top of mind issue. Another 41% have selected RMF accreditations, and 30% hardening around app stacks. Looks like actually 57% is tied between accelerated ATOs and CMMC readiness and keeping up with quarterly STIG updates.
Okay, yeah. This is excellent. This kind of validates lots of the assumptions and lots of the data that we receive every day from the integrator community. So this is exactly as we would expect. So thanks everybody for that. That's excellent feedback. All right, let's talk about the ConfigOS product and how it works within a given integrator implementation. The product itself, ConfigOS, is comprised of two components. There's the ConfigOS Foundry and the ConfigOS Command Center. Now, the Foundry is essentially the policy workbench tool. And what happens is you, the integrator, will get the ConfigOS Foundry, and you will have all of the SteelCloud content that we provide with the product. Now, these are delivered in the form of ConfigOS signatures. There is a signature for Windows 10. There's a signature for Red Hat 7. There's a signature for Chrome. As you get the idea, there's a policy signature for every single STIG policy control that we support. Now, you're able to take that content and then edit it in order to create your own baseline. And this means that you get to choose which controls you're going to apply, which ones you're going to enforce. You can add controls, you can extend controls. If a control calls for a range of values, say between 1 and 4, you can say, you know what, for this particular program, it's always a 3. So you edit that, you create that, and then you're able to establish a baseline. This is also the product that allows you to harden around any given app stack. The Foundry product will allow you to identify every single Cat 1, Cat 2, and Cat 3 for any COTS or GOTS app, and we can determine all of those conflicts inside about 60 minutes. Now, once you've created that baseline, it's then published as an encrypted policy signature, and it's available to the ConfigOS Command Center to go off and do its work. This is where all of the heavy lifting occurs. We take that policy from the Foundry, and we're able
Nigel,
to. Yes.
Can I get you to pause for just a second? It looks like the poll question is still showing for folks.
Oh, yikes.
So let's pause for just a minute. Let's see if we can get rid of that.
How's that?
Hi, I'm going to chime in here. Nigel, I'm just going to take out the presentation mode and then put it back in, okay? Hold on.
Yeah, folks are saying they're still seeing the poll question, so bear with us for just a minute. Sure. I promise this worked perfectly in our rehearsal.
It did. It did.
Okay, looks like I'm seeing the presentation again. So if somebody could just let us know. Yes, okay. Yeah, everybody's seeing the presentation again, so let's carry on.
Good, good. All right. So hopefully you were able to follow along a little. I was explaining that the product has two components, the Foundry and the Command Center. And the Foundry is basically where you're able to take the content that we provide, which of course we derive from DISA, and you're able to create your own policy standards, your own baselines that you're able to deploy. And then ConfigOS Command Center is the product that does all of that heavy lifting and provides the automation around policy compliance. This is the product that will scan and determine where an endpoint is in compliance, where it's not in compliance. It will remediate. And I want to draw special attention to what I mean by remediate here. I mean, we will actually fix non-compliances. This means that we're actually reaching out to those endpoints. We're looking at those registries, local security policy, advanced audit policy. In Linux endpoints, we're looking at different file structures. We're looking at starting daemons, we're adding software, removing software, but we're editing those configuration files in order to bring them into conformance with the standard that we created in the Foundry. So that's kind of how the product works. Now, a little bit more detail here on ConfigOS from an architectural consideration. We purposely designed our product to have the least impact on any given integrator program. First of all, there are no agents. The product runs centrally, and it uses encrypted SSH in order to get to Linux endpoints and WMI for any Windows endpoints. The product itself is a 64-bit app, so it's very high performance. We've proven in countless integrator deployments that the product is capable of 5, 10, 15,000 endpoints per hour from a scanning viewpoint, and we can easily remediate upwards of 3,000 to 5,000 per hour per instance of ConfigOS. I mentioned that we've got a minimal footprint. There are no web servers, there's no database, there's no internet required, there's no reach back to SteelCloud. In some of our tactical deployments where there's limited bandwidth, we can even throttle the product back to diminish its impact on available bandwidth. As you saw, we do the content today for the Windows platforms and the Linux platforms, and we have just released our first foray into switching gear. We've done the Cisco iOS XE STIG, and that is for routers, and that is something that we've just released this week. Now, the key thing about ConfigOS from an operational viewpoint is there's no special accommodations required to bring ConfigOS into your program. It slots right in with the existing personnel, with the existing resources, and is able to just accelerate those deliverables rapidly, sort of plug and play deployment. So there's nothing that's needed here, no big heavy lift in order to accommodate this product. The content that we provide allows you to begin creating your own content rapidly. So you can tune these baselines that we ship with the product to the app requirements, that is to say hardening around apps, and then often things like organizational requirements. So for example, if you look at the STIG policy and the legal banner control, for example, this is a generic US government banner, and it may be that your command has their own specific banner, and that's something that you can easily change and make the standard baseline implementation for that use case. There's lots of organizational requirements that are unique to any given command or any kind of implementation. So those are some of the architectural considerations. It really is a very simple, straightforward product that has very little footprint. All right, we're now on to poll question number 3.
All right, so our third poll question is, what is your 2021 plan to address compliance? You're going to add people, automation, or differentiation? And again, we'll leave this up for about a minute or so to give you time to put in your answers. Nigel, the good news is most folks are selecting automation.
Good, good. That is the correct answer, by the way.
You're not supposed to tell them while the question's still up.
Oh, what did I do? Oh, no.
All right, so we've got 88% who have selected automation, 12% say differentiation, and 8% plan to add people.
And that is great. I'm thinking this is actually quite revealing. It is a bit of a trick question, as you probably gathered, that automation is obviously the key. But I think as an integrator, what we have to do is look at the balance between human resource and automation. where we can automate things, we obviously should. And sometimes there are requirements for SMEs that have specific requirements around hardening, around app stacks and different deployments, and so we understand that. But also, I think as an integrator, when we look at bidding for different programs, we have to differentiate ourselves from other integrators. And so increasingly, we're seeing integrators adopt the automation that ConfigOS brings, and that differentiates them from those that don't. By the same token, those that don't differentiate themselves from those that do. So some sort of food for thought there. I think automation is key when we are up against the gun for so many. Oh, lost my use case here. For so many accreditation time crunches in order to get new deployments into production as quickly as possible. All right, let's move on here. So what's in it for the integrator? I think this is kind of follow on from that discussion. I think certainly when you're looking at fixed cost contracts or cost plus contracts, a lot of integrators will come to us where quite often the IA aspect of any given program deployment, that cost can run out of control. And this starts to compromise profitability, it starts to compromise lead times, and so ConfigOS is often brought in, and the benefit there is that it's able to claw back some of that cost loss and also to rein in some of that time overrun. I think what we're seeing with our integrated partners is that there is definitely an IA personnel shortage. It's here in the DC metro area, but it's also across the country. There are finite people that have the SME experience around doing this work. And what we need to do is to flatten that organization and reskill our personnel to be able to be ready to rapidly operationalize policy compliance. And I think what we're kind of getting to here is we shouldn't be having manual human intervention around having a computer in compliance. The computer should be able to get itself in compliance. When we look at the sort of new stuff that's coming down the pike, all of these new program initiatives, these modernization strategies, these cloud deployments, these all have these requirements for ongoing policy compliance. Whether you're in AWS or in a data center, the STIG requirements are ongoing. I'm heartened to see that people are looking at RMF accreditation. Certainly, ConfigOS can do all of the heavy lifting around compliance and reporting so that you only have to kind of put your RMF package together. I saw a question earlier asking about EMAS integration, and from an RMF perspective, the ConfigOS product suite allows you to output directly into STIG Viewer, and that STIG Viewer data can easily be ingested as part of the EMAS accreditation process. Of course, CMMC is a big deal for 2021, and we are focusing on level 3 and higher. As everybody knows on the call, I think there's approximately 300,000 government contractors that have to meet CMMC requirements. SteelCloud is ready, by the way. Everything is in place and we are ready for our audit. And that's where I think ConfigOS can come in here, is to get any entity in readiness for audit so that it's a simple rubber stamp and everything should proceed nice and easy. And of course, any program that has to get things done where there's a requirement for rapid compliance, all of these things kind of fit in and around ConfigOS for your use case there. We have, I wanted to share with you some use cases for our product. The product is in fact deployed throughout the Department of Defense. I wanted to share with you some programs here. The key thing is that all of these are in conjunction with integrators like yourselves. Every single one of these is an integrator program. The Army Corps of Engineers, they just recently worked with us on an enterprise deployment. We are supporting over 40,000 Windows 10 workstations, and there's about 4,000 Linux and Windows servers. So this is quite a large Army implementation, but we work with other Army programs, including INSCOM, the National Guard bureaus, and many other different deployments. And all of these, of course, are through integrators, but sometimes they're through integrators and we don't know where they are. We just know that it's Army, for example. The Air Force, we've been quite prolific in the last couple of years. We were involved with the ITAS program, the Enterprise IT as a Service. This is an OTA initiative that's looking to be permanent. We're in year 3 of that program. ConfigOS is used for 47,000 Windows 10 workstations right now, and that's going to be moving to 126,000 in 2021. And indeed, it's thought that the entire Air Force will be using this new ITAS platform. We also work with simulator systems, the Air Force SCARS program. This is for the flight training systems. We work with the A10, for example, the Warthog. This is the only STIG simulator in the entire Air Force, and now working with another major integrator, the SCARS program is going to be deployed with ConfigOS for all 186 Air Force bases. So we're very excited about that. I think people on the call are familiar with NGEN. This is an award from the government for 7.7 billion, and we worked hand in glove with the winning integrator for that provision of our product, and ConfigOS is going to be deployed for 400,000 endpoints for all of those Navy, Marine Corps servers and workstations in what was the old NMCI. We're also involved in many other Navy programs that you can see that are possibly familiar to you. The Marine Corps, we're involved with the NCIS. We're also involved with the Marine Corps Community Services, and then some of the specialist operations groups. ConfigOS is deployed widely, but all of this work is done through you, the integrator community. So we work with all of you. We very much enjoy working with you, and I think we can add tremendous value to the partnership between our organizations. Some of our install base that will be familiar to everybody on the call here. Of course, we work with this. We work with the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, and the Marine Corps, and then there's some specialist commands there that I think will be known by all of you, and a lot of civilian, of course, as well, especially Homeland Security. But those are some of the integrator partners that we have active deployments, and we're eager to keep working with those. So with that, I'm going to open up for a Q&A.
All right, thank you, Nigel. We have gotten a number of questions during the presentation. I know you briefly addressed differentiation when we had our poll question up, but we did have somebody ask if you could explain what differentiation was. And like I said, I know you talked about that a little bit, but if you could just briefly explain that again to make sure the question gets answered for them.
Yeah, I think having the presence of automation in your bid is a differentiator. I think when you look at the allocation that you make for the IA aspects of any given program, that's a differentiator. I think having the forethought to bring automation to accelerate deliverables and the entire lead time is a differentiator. So that's kind of where we're coming from on that, is that it needs to be a differentiator, but as I kind of alluded, if you don't have automation, that's also a differentiator, but for the wrong reason.
Okay. Another question that I know you addressed was, are there any compliance reports that can be imported into EMAS? And the short answer was yes.
Yes, that's exactly right. So ConfigOS, when it scans or remediates any given endpoint, it outputs directly into the STIG viewer checklist. And one of the things I alluded to, and I'll kind of mention it a moment here, is that we include not just the controls that can be automated, but all of the documentation controls as well. So when you look at the DISA STIG, say for Windows 10 or for an Office Suite component, whatever it might be, we account for every single control, and all of that content is presented to STIG Viewer for the entire picture for that compliance. And then that STIG Viewer data can easily be ingested into EMAS for that accreditation.
Okay, another question that just came in. Are there different roles in the user interface of the command center so that people can have only read access and can't run the configure button function?
Yes, yes, we've actually added that in our very new 2.8 version. So yes, you can set up user profiles and you can limit people's access to the product. And some people may be doing A&A work versus doing remediation work. So you can set up the system in order to support those use cases.
Okay, great. How do you adjust configuration changes to remediate most systems while also not remediating legacy systems? Is that done by MAC or IP, or how do you do that?
Yeah, it's IP, it's host name. So what we have within the product is what's called the ConfigOS network tree. So we have all of the target endpoints that we have defined. We have, as I say, the IP address or the host name. We have credentials, and obviously for the Microsoft platforms, it must be administrator. For the Linux endpoints, where we often do the sudo elevation as required by the government. And so we can target individual endpoints, we can set up groups, and those groups can inherit credentials, they can push credentials, all of those configurations. And then we can do like bulk loads where we can do an AD scan, we can do a ping sweep. Some customers will typically use a CSV, for example, to target precisely the endpoints that they wish to do scanning and remediation work for.
Okay, another question that just came in. How do you deal, two questions just came in. Let me get to the first one here. How does this tool differ from creating a GPO and having the GPO sync?
That's a great question. The GPO is, is typically managed obviously by the AD folk. And in our experience, the results are very similar. However, the difference is that the AD folk, depending on the program initiative, are often an organization unto themselves. And they're typically not current with the latest STIG policy. And the policy that they create is often generic. And this means that things can break. Now, if they don't break, it means that they have created a policy that is not complete. The other thing about using group policy is it can take an endpoint out of compliance. And one of the ingenious capabilities that we've added to ConfigOS is that when we scan a control and we then remediate that control, after we've brought that control into compliance with the STIG baseline, we can do a forced GP update to see if group policy is taking it out of compliance. And this often happens. And if it does happen, we flag it as a group policy conflict that can be sent to the AD folk. The other thing about using group policy to apply STIG controls is there's no rollback capability. So when you apply STIG using GPO, that's it, it's set. With ConfigOS, you can apply that policy and you can roll back. You can undo what you did, and you can also go back to a known good state. With group policy, once you've applied that, that is it. You have to create new policy to overwrite what you just did.
All right, good to know. So here's a timely question. With so many folks teleworking and not being connected to the network all of the time, how do you continue to ensure compliance?
That's a great question. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that, and our developers are busily working at looking at how we can create what we're calling a beacon. This means already, through VPN and what have you, we're able to get to these endpoints and do the compliance work. But if somebody's disconnected for a long period of time and they come onto the network, one of the features that we're looking to add is the ability to have a kind of a beacon installed, kind of a micro agent, if you will, that when the system comes onto the network, it flags itself and says, hey, I haven't been on the system for a while. I need STIG updates. Can you get me the latest policy controls, please? And the system will automatically get updated as it comes onto the network.
Okay, a couple of network-related questions. Does the SteelCloud solution include network appliances, first of all, and do you or will you support Juniper switches?
Yes and yes. Today we are delivering on the iOS XE STIG for the Cisco content, and we have that today for routers, and we're working on switches right now. That's going to be coming out shortly, and I think from there we're going to be market driven. So Cisco is obviously the main player in the market. I think Juniper will probably be second. Any of those contenders will be market driven or customer driven on how we do those.
Okay, great. Can you easily detect changes between scans using SteelCloud?
Yes, we can, and that's a great question. One of the things we've recently added to ConfigOS is our Splunk integration. So the product, while it provides output into things like STIG Viewer in the checklist format, we also create a whole bunch of HTML reports and also JSON output. And that JSON can now be presented directly to products that can ingest JSON, and that includes ITMS products such as ServiceNow, for example. But recently we've added Cisco content, and you can look at compliance for any given endpoint. We have this hierarchical view of the entire enterprise, and we can drill down to any given workstation or a specific control at any given endpoint. We also have an organizational view as it relates to policy compliance over time. So we have we can see changes from scan to scan. Is there any drift? All of that is addressed within the product now.
Okay, questions keep pouring in. This is really good. So how does SteelCloud coexist with other tools that are commonly used for automation of tasks like Phantom from Splunk or Ansible, WSUS, EPO, etc.?
Yeah, we work in conjunction with all of those products. There's Ansible playbooks that can be used to bring ConfigOS into play, for example. Our product is a STIG policy automation tool, so it supports those use cases. And sometimes, of course, there is overlap, as we talked about with things like group policy, and you could script policy compliance as well. But what we're trying to do here is create something that can easily be maintained, can be deployed and managed really effectively without having SMEs that are supporting these complex tool sets.
All right, somebody wants to know, is there a list of all the STIG baselines that you support? And probably the follow-up question would be, how can they get it?
Yes, there is. We have about 10,000 policy controls that we ship with our product today. And I'll gladly provide a spreadsheet list of all of those. But as you would imagine, it's all of the popular OSs, it's all of the popular app stacks, including things like databases and web servers and office suites and browsers and all of those kinds of things. So it's everything that the customer must have. And of course, our intent is to eventually address the entire DISA portfolio.
All right, another question. Does ConfigOS help with the STIG requirement for syslogging on network equipment?
I do not know the answer to that question.
We stumped you, all right.
You did, you got me.
All right, we'll have to find out the answer to that and let everybody know on that one. Let's see, we've got some more questions here. Trying to make sure not asking ones that we've already addressed. So does SteelCloud work with ITSM products?
Yes, we do. We work with ServiceNow. We've worked with Remedy. We've worked with the Edge Core products. So all of these products can easily ingest the ConfigOS JSON. What we're looking at is we're building out in this current quarter our support for an API where we will be able to have a much more integrated integration, if you will. So, but today we work well with ServiceNow in a number of different programs.
Okay, I don't know if you addressed this during the presentation, I don't recall, but somebody wants to know, how do you create STIG checklist artifacts for ATO?
Well, the checklist report is there as an artifact, and it's available as part of the reporting, as part of the log file database, if you will. So all of that content is there for multiple instances. For every scan, every remediation, every artifact is kept, and these are available at will.
Okay. Obviously, cost is always a concern when we're talking about cybersecurity. Folks want to know, how is the product licensed?
Okay, yep. The way that we license ConfigOS is it's an annual subscription, and the license fee is determined by the number of OS instances. Very simply, we have an OS fee for Windows servers. So that could be 2008, 12, 16, 19, domain, remember, it doesn't matter to us, it's a Windows server price point. We then have a Windows workstation price point for that 7, 8, and 10. And then of course, we have Linux endpoints. So while we have the Red Hat portfolio, we also have things like Ubuntu, we have SUSE, we have CentOS, we have Oracle Linux. And so all of those are, it doesn't matter. It's really, there's a license fee for any Linux endpoints.
Okay. So here's a question about private cloud environments that include container orchestration like OpenStack, OpenShift, Docker, etc. These are very complex, and a lot of them don't have SCAP content, but just checklists. How do you deal with those?
Yeah, these are things that we're keeping a very close eye on. Certainly things like Kubernetes and those kinds of use cases. The STIG requirements still do persist. It's really about licensing, and it's about deployment. So we have been looking at these. We can certainly provide STIG compliance in these kinds of use cases. It's really about how do we account for them and how do we manage them. These are often created on the fly. They have a short lifespan. They're kind of transient, if you will, and so it's really about ConfigOS licensing rather than operational requirements. But yeah, we're staying very close to this. We're very much aware that this is where the Department of Defense is going, the federal government is going, but we're also very mindful that there's a lot of Windows Server 2008 out there as well. So we're staying current.
Okay. Another question, does SteelCloud cover a majority of STIG checks, or does it just focus on STIG SCAP content? I don't know if you already addressed that when we talked about all the STIGs that you do cover.
Yeah, the SCAP content has diminished in recent years. The DISA doesn't have content, for example, for databases, for web servers. I think they've stopped now on the Office suites. So ConfigOS has all of that content, and in the absence of benchmarks from the government, we're able to create benchmark standards for all of those different use cases. And our content is consistent with the security compliance checker, with the SCAP content, and indeed the ACAS Nessus content as well.
Okay, great. I don't see any more questions coming in. Looks like almost everyone stayed with us through the whole presentation, so we really appreciate that. We're glad to see that it was relevant and that the questions were relevant as well. We want to thank everybody for attending today, and to let you know that you should, in the next couple of hours, be getting an email with your gift card code. Also, to remind you before we close the webinar that there are some handouts down below in the window there that you can download. So if you have any other questions, you can contact cybersecurity-solutions@dlt.com, and we can get you in touch with Nigel and the folks over at SteelCloud. Once you leave today's webinar, again, you're going to receive an email with a survey, and we would really appreciate it if you'd fill that out and provide your feedback. Let us know how we did, where you are in your STIG journey, and what we can do to help you get better and get more secure. And within 24 to 48 hours, you should also receive an email with a link to view the recording if you want to go back if there were any questions that you missed the answer to, or some information you didn't manage to jot down. You can watch the webinar again. So again, I want to thank everybody for sticking with us. We're coming up on the end of our time. So on behalf of DLT and SteelCloud, myself and Nigel, we want to thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day and a great week. Stay safe.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate everyone's time today. Excellent questions. Really, really good experience. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.